yes, it is, my beloved, but still you have the concept that it is possible to make observations and experiments and look at the results and look at what that says about how things actually work, and therefore we can discard the theories that we cannot support through these observations. Well, it is possible to take this exact approach to the human psyche, to the concept of consciousness. It is possible to investigate consciousness, look at how does the psyche actually work, what works, what doesn't work, conduct observations, conduct experiments, and then you can come up with something that we are giving you today as a mystical philosophy, but you can actually come up with it as something that is completely based on experience and experiment, and therefore you can come up with an entirely new view of the psyche that, when it is developed, will not be seen as religious or even spiritual. It will be seen as simply a natural, objective, neutral realization, a higher awareness, and a natural element in the evolution of humanity, a higher awareness of how the human psyche works, what a human being is, what our potential really is. And so, when you come to this point, you are, so to speak, demystifying the topic. And therefore, it is not a religious approach, because you are not actually asked to believe this, you are asked to test it out yourself. Can you raise your consciousness? Can you feel a difference? Well then, it obviously works for you, doesn't it? Does following this path make you feel better about yourself? Well then, it must work. And as more and more people begin to actually demonstrate that it works, there will be that shift where now it is not a matter of calling it religious, it is not a matter of belief or not belief, it has simply become the new norm, the newly accepted truth. Do you realize, my beloved, that if you go back just 100 or 200 years and look at the average person, they had virtually no concept of the psyche, what the psyche is, how it functions. So modern science, and in part credited to Sigmund Freud, who, although he took this in a slightly unfortunate direction, still broke new ground and made psychology a more accepted science. Then there has been an increase in the awareness of the psyche, so that most people in the more developed part of the world have an awareness that there is something called the human psyche, and it has a great impact on their lives. There can be psychological problems, psychological illness, and if you go back just a few decades, you would see how there was an incredible social trauma associated with seeking help with psychological problems. Psychological illness was a taboo that most people did not even dare to acknowledge for themselves, and they certainly did not dare to seek help because it was considered as socially unacceptable in many circles. Of course, it still is today in some, but you can clearly see that in many nations the trauma has gone away, the stigma has gone away, and more people are seeking help with depression or other mental illness. They are going to psychologists, other forms of therapy, and this is a development that you could scarcely have foreseen just a few decades ago. And so what has shifted here is that the awareness of the psyche, that it has a great impact on your life, and that it is necessary for human beings sometimes to do something about their psyche, has now become accepted. It has now become normal. And it is not a big leap to go to the point that instead of waiting for a mental illness to occur, it is better to have an ounce of prevention, and so that you teach the children from an early age how to avoid mental illness by actually looking at how society can help children function better and help their citizens function better and come to feel good about themselves. This is not religious, it is not spiritual, it is not mystical. It is only a matter of time before it becomes seen as absolutely natural and absolutely self-evident, and people will look back and can scarcely understand that there was a time where individuals and societies resisted this, which now seems so self-evident. And so, as a result of this, these religions that give you answers from without and demands that you will believe in these answers even if they don't make sense will clearly fade away. This does not mean that people will not have questions about the spiritual aspects of life, and naturally these questions will not be answered by some state-defined religion. They will not be answered as people go to school and get an education, because this will be focused on the universal aspects of the psyche. But people will naturally pursue this on an individual basis. And again, I do not actually look at the emergence of one dominant religious or spiritual or mystical teaching or philosophy, even though I of course look to the fact that ascended masters will become more known, will become more accepted, and that more and more people will study our teachings on an individual basis. But there will always be room for other spiritual teachings, other directions. There will be room for many different kinds of spiritual communities, or maybe they will not even be called spiritual communities, because they will be seen as a form of community where people can come together and support each other in the raising of consciousness, in the answering of their questions about life, and fulfilling that basic human need that most people have, and that more people will become aware of, namely that you need to have some understanding of who you are, how the world works, and how you fit into the world. And so again, there are of course many different levels. I do not look to this process as coming to a point where, when you have gone through the educational system, everybody is at the same level of consciousness. Naturally, people will come into embodiment at many different levels, and so there will still be many different levels of consciousness in society. In fact, there will always be 144 possible levels of consciousness on Earth, even if the scale shifts upwards. And so therefore, these people will need different things, different explanations, different practices, because there will be a greater awareness of the need to practice some form of technique in order to raise your awareness. And again, there will not be one that will be sponsored or acknowledged officially by society. It will again be up to people to choose this individually. And so, my beloved, there will still be much diversity in the Golden Age. In fact, there will be more diversity in the Golden Age that you have right now in the field of spirituality, and of course in many other fields as well. Now, is this all idyllic? Is this all wonderful? Does it mean that all problems will fade away? Well, of course it doesn't, because there will come a point where, or rather there will always be a point, there will always be a process where there are people who are lagging behind. Naturally, there will come a point as we move much further into the Golden Age where crime will simply disappear. If you have a basic income that allows you to sustain yourself materially, and if you have a sense of purpose and direction, and you have freedom to express yourself creatively, or for that matter, have the freedom to sit under a tree and do nothing, then why would you need to steal from anyone else? If you have a healthy knowledge about psychology, then why would you need the escapism of drugs? Just imagine, my beloved, how drugs and the drug trade tie up incredible amounts of resources in the justice systems of the world. How many people are in prison because of this? how much this costs society, how much it costs to treat the people who are addicted, and so on. And imagine that this all fades away. This will of course happen, but in the beginning stages, certainly in the coming decades, there will be some crime. How will then society deal with this? Well, why will there be crime actually? It will be because it will take some time to implement a new educational system that will teach children about the psyche. And so there will be many adults who have not received this education, and you cannot expect that they will all want to educate themselves in this. So there will still be some that are in a lower state of consciousness where they see crime as the only way to get what they want. And this of course will mean that there will have to be a police force. These people will be captured by the police and they will be put into the justice system. But how will this system work? Well, you will, within a relatively short period of time, when these changes I'm talking about are implemented, you will see a shift where the justice system will shift away from punishment. Because what is actually the point of punishing? Well, is it not a rather desperate attempt to, number one, scare other people away from going into crime, and number two, making society feel better so that the citizens who are not committing crime can feel that those who do are at least being punished. And so when you shift away from this, you realize that naturally people have their free will, and if they are not interested in working on their psychology, then society cannot force them to do so, as long as they live within the law. But when a person breaks the law and therefore harms the whole with what is clearly antisocial behavior, then society has a right to say that you cannot now escape looking at your own psychology and doing whatever is needed to overcome the state of consciousness that caused you to commit a crime. And so you will see that there will be a certain, in the beginning, a certain force of forcing criminals into going into a psychological treatment. But gradually there will be less and less need to force, because they will simply be given a choice. Will they have a traditional form of punishment where they sit in a prison cell with nothing to do, or will they go into a more positive process that can actually help them get out more quickly and therefore lead a more constructive life? For naturally it will be so that instead of saying that people have to spend 10 years in jail, you will say that people have to enter this treatment process, and when the people in charge of this process judge that a person is ready to re-enter society, then the person will be naturally let out and will actually be given help to reintegrate in society or to find a positive way to sustain itself. Perhaps even the enactment of the basic payment will prevent many people from going into crime, or at least making easier for them to go out of crime, because they can come out of prison or the treatment process and maybe actually decide to go into an education instead of being out on the street with no job and no ability to get a job because nobody will hire somebody who's been to prison. And so now there can be this shift where society actually sees that people who have gone into crime and have gone through the treatment process deserve a second chance, and certainly many people might be willing to help these people get on a constructive track with their lives. And so this can bring very, very profound changes in society. Now, what will happen in the business field? Well, suddenly there can be, or rather gradually there can be a shift where you begin to realize that the old-fashioned capitalist model of businesses has become completely and utterly obsolete when you recognize that we are not material beings, and we are in fact all beings who have the potential to expand our awareness and grow. All of a sudden there will be the shift where business will shift away from the current capitalistic model, where it is the more aggressive businesses that survive and thrive, where businesses are seeking to compete each other, they are seeking to destroy the competition, they are seeking to gain a monopoly. Instead, there will be a shift, and it will be demonstrated as it is to some degree already, that those businesses who have the greatest creativity will prosper, because they are the ones who will come up with the new ideas. They are the ones who will invent, or rather be the instrument for receiving from me, entire new industries that the old-fashioned capitalists could not even envision or could not take seriously. My beloved, some of you have seen the program where there was a large American company, which is now not so large, called Xerox. And they had a small research branch that were given some freedom of creativity, and in the infancy of the computer age, they had invented the computer mouse. And the executives of Xerox were presented this little gadget, and they were saying, do you seriously expect Xerox to promote a device called a mouse? And they completely rejected the technology, which was then discovered by the founder of Apple Computer, who saw the potential, and all of a sudden an entirely new industry was developed that the old-fashioned capitalist could not even fathom. And still there are some of these die-hard capitalists who cannot fathom what happened with the computer industry, and who are actually waiting for the point where the computer industry will decline and lose its importance, and we will get back to the old ways of doing business. And this is, of course, like the dinosaurs that refused to die, but eventually became extinct. And in the new age, in the not too distant future, there will be this shift where at first, of course, many business leaders will go into denial and attempt to continue business as usual, where more and more will see, and more new leaders will come up who see that the real key to the future is creativity. And therefore there will also be this shift where you see that, well, what is creativity? How can we actually expand creativity? How can we promote creativity? Well, is it not logical that when people raise their awareness, their level of consciousness, they free their creative resources. They become more creative. So these business leaders will start promoting this in their businesses. They will start demanding that society does this on a large scale. And all of a sudden there can be this shift where you shift away from the more aggressive forms of doing business, and you shift into a focus on creativity. This can also cause a shift where people see that there has been a certain cycle in the evolution of many businesses. First, a business starts up in a new field. It is in an expansive phase. There may in fact be some room for creativity. But then a business grows to a certain size where now it dominates either the entire industry or it dominates a certain country. And suddenly there is a shift where the business now becomes more concerned about maintaining its market share, its market position, rather than expanding, rather than being creative, rather than finding new fields. And so this actually has caused many businesses to stagnate or go into a decline. And many businesses have even disappeared because they could not reinvent themselves, and instead some other company came up that was more in tune with the times, more in tune with the new opportunities, more in tune with the needs of the people, and suddenly they took over the market. And business leaders will become more aware of how to avoid this, and that they do not want to avoid this. Now there will also be a shift where business leaders begin to realize that in order to attract truly creative people, truly dedicated people, truly balanced people that have the psychological wholeness to actually carry out their tasks, they need to find a new ownership model. It simply isn't enough that one or a small group of shareholders own the business and most of the employees work for it for a salary without actually ever getting a sense of ownership or physical ownership of the business. So as the consciousness is raised and as there comes to be more an awareness, as we have said many times, of the power elite, which again is not beyond what people are ready to acknowledge, then it will be acknowledged that the businesses that are most creative cannot allow themselves to be taken over by the financial power elite who are simply shareholders who go out and when a company becomes big enough or seems to have a growth potential, they buy the shares so that they can make the profit when the company grows. But otherwise they absolutely do not care about the business or the people working there, and if it comes to it, they are willing to sell their shares, sell the business, merge the business into others, have it be taken over by bigger companies or whatever. And so these new business leaders will see that what needs to be created is an ownership model where the people who are working in the company are the ones who own the business and are reaping the rewards of its success. Instead of having some shareholders that have not contributed to the business but are simply extracting money from it and in the process are willing to kill the business if they can make a bigger profit on that in the short term. And so there will be this various ways of implementing this new ownership model, and this will of course give the people who work in the business a greater sense of purpose, a greater sense of personal involvement and ownership, a greater sense that they are part of something, that they are allowed to be creative and allowed to make a contribution. And again, it will be seen that these businesses are the ones who will prosper, and they will begin to take over the economy in many nations. Naturally, you will also, within a not so distant future, see that there will be a breakthrough in the awareness of the power elite and how the power elite have manipulated the economy and the money system. And this will lead many nations to come to that truly revolutionary shift in consciousness where they realize that it is in fact one of the primary responsibilities of a democratic government to make sure that the economy of their country and even the economy of the world cannot be dominated and controlled by a small power elite who do not have the interest of the people at heart, or for that matter, have the interest of the people anywhere else. They have no concern whatsoever for the people and only look at them as slaves that they can make work for them and they can reap the rewards of the people's labor. This, of course, is not democracy. This is not freedom, and it is the responsibility of a democratic government to make sure that this does not happen. And so there will be this awareness that we need to rethink how the money system works. We need to get out of a debt-based economy. We cannot allow a small power elite to create money and reap the profit from lending it with interest. This is something that the state needs to take on, and the state needs to be in control of the money system so that only the state benefits and thereby the people benefit, because if the state makes money off of money, the people do not have to pay so much taxes. And it needs to be seen that the only institution in a society that has a right to make money off of money is the state. But the state, of course, cannot go into the many forms of schemes that the capitalists have come up with in order to manipulate the economy, because the state has no interest in manipulating the economy. It simply has an interest in creating a money system that allows for the greatest amount of creativity, movability of the money, the greatest ability to finance new businesses, because this will promote a growth in the economy, and the more the economy grows, the more it is in the interest of all of the people, and also, of course, in the interest of the state. And so these are very, very dramatic shifts compared to what you have today, but they are not so unrealistic that they are so far off. And it can come to that point where there is such an awareness of the existence of power elites that they will very quickly be put out of commission by the democratic nations, because there will be either a raised awareness of how the power elites works and how anti-democratic it is, or there will be an awareness that if we do not reform the money system, then our economies, our debt-based economies, are going to collapse, because the debt has reached such proportions that no country can pay it back. And it is, in fact, in no way democratic, in no way in accordance with the democratic ideals that the population of an entire country are enslaved financially, so that for the next many decades, a majority of their resources will go to pay back the interest to a small power elite. How is this democracy? How is this freedom? How is this allowable in a democratic nation, in a democratic world? And so, naturally, again, this ties in with exploitation, where as people begin to realize how the economy is being exploited by a small elite, it will be seen that naturally we cannot allow this to happen, and therefore we will create a new money system. Now, the new money system can be implemented in a variety of ways, but the main thing here is that when you do not concentrate or allow the concentration of wealth in the hands of a small percentage of the population, but instead spread it out over the entire population, then what you will see is that spending, consumer spending as it is often called, will increase. And that means that there will be a need to produce all of these goods that people want to buy, and this will create a tremendous growth in the economy. And so, if you look at this very, very simple fact, my beloved, if you have 2% of the population of the United States who controls 90% of the wealth, well, those 2% have the money to buy all the luxury yachts they want. But how many luxury yachts can you actually use? If you instead took some of that money and gave it out to the population, then many more people would want to buy not a luxury yacht, but maybe a nice boat. And all of a sudden, there would be such a much bigger demand for boats than there is today for luxury yachts, that it would create a tremendous growth in the economy. And this is just a very simple example, but there are so many other shifts that will happen when you free up the money so that it is not tied up in these investment schemes that really have only the purpose of creating greater and greater numbers on certain people's financial accounts so that they can feel that they are richer and richer. They have long ago gone beyond the point where they can actually spend the money, but they have this insatiable need because they have been sucked into being controlled by the fallen beings. They have an insatiable need to accumulate more and more money. And when this is not allowed to happen, the money will now no longer be tied up. It will become liquefied. Therefore, it will be freed up to be invested into new businesses, new ventures, and all of a sudden again, there will be a tremendous growth in the economy. The simple fact is, my beloved, that if you look at a country like the United States today, this country prides itself and loves to promote itself as the richest nation in the world. But how is it the richest nation when 2% of the people control 90% of the wealth? The United States is the richest exclusive elitist club in the world, but it is not the richest nation, because it cannot even afford to give basic health care to all of its citizens, which most of the nations in Europe can afford. And so you will see that if these changes could happen, so that the United States would see that it is their responsibility as a democratic government to prevent that 90% of the wealth is concentrated in the hands of 2% of the people, then you would see that there would be such a freeing up of resources that the economy, within a matter of a couple of decades, could grow. The national economy could grow to 10 times its current size. And if that money was spent to benefit all of the people, then you could say that the United States is the richest nation in the world. But the United States have to be very careful that they are not overtaken by some of the other nations that also have a large population. Because I tell you, my beloved, that if a nation with as large a population as India could implement some of these ideas, then simply because they have so many more people and they are currently at such a low standard of living materially and would like to come up to a higher standard, then the Indian economy could quickly become larger than the economy of the United States, unless the United States really allows tremendous new growth to happen. So you see, my beloved, those countries who are willing to implement these principles will be the ones who prosper the most. And the question is, will it be the countries who today are affluent, but are often controlled by a small power elite? Or will it be the countries who are not so affluent and who have perhaps a greater willingness to increase the economy in order to allow their people to reach a higher standard of living? China, of course, could also become a very, very rich country if they could throw away the last remnants of the communist mindset and certain other aspects of the national psyche of always wanting to isolate itself, standing apart from the rest of the world in order to feel superior. And so you see here that the potential for economic growth is simply unfathomable to most people. Now, if you go back to the 1800s, and if you had taken people back then, for example, people who knew something about the economy,